We wanted a new font that Widgit could use throughout all of its products and services that was accessible. It wanted to look friendly but professional and be appropriate for our wide range of users. We found that a lot of fonts suit some people and not others, or they look too serious. So it's just finding something that was encompassing the widest group of users that we could. Dalton Maag have a really good reputation in the font world. They've created fonts for people such as the BBC and Netflix. So when I wrote our brief about an accessible font to them, and I had an initial meeting with Alini, she is so passionate about accessibility. So it just seemed like the perfect match that we couldn't have found anywhere else.
When we received the email from you, I was over the moon. In fact, our account manager, Katie, she said, I think this is an Eleni project, because from the very get-go, you mentioned how important accessibility is.
It needs to be clear, it needs to be readable by a whole range of people, so it needs to be accessible for people with dyslexia. A lot of our users are people learning to read for the first time, so it wants to be appropriate. It needs to fit with the school way of teaching writing and handwriting.
Accessibility relies on three different things, which is legibility, readability, and likability. And those three different elements have a different role in how the font is perceived. Legibility is how quickly you recognize a C to an O or an A to an E. Readability is more about how the font is typeset, so how lengthy your sentences are and how big your line gaps are, and so on and so forth. And then the third one is likability. And likability is purely what people prefer, usually the preference goes with what they're most used to seeing. And I thought that was a very interesting element with your brand, with Widgit specifically, because you work a lot with children, and children have different preferences when it comes to accessibility. So there was a lot of that to kind of take into consideration. But you also work not just with children, right? So it was like, how do we balance the needs of different readers and also readers from not just that focus only on the English language, but also in different languages like Italian.
It was a really interesting collective process. So it was led by Dalton Maag. So we first started off with a project looking at the culture of the company and how we wanted to portray ourselves. We did a whole exercise looking at how other organisations and the fonts they use and how we were trying to match the culture of the company and how it wants to be seen with the fonts that they use, also with the accessibility. So we sort of worked together on that until we had an initial brief. Dalton Maag then did various variations that we tried out with different users to look at what worked, what didn't, certainly looking at some of the accessibility aspects.
When we start with a project, we always like to go a little bit wild with the designs, because I personally think that it's easier to tone something down than to take something neutral and add personality to it. So the lead designer, together with the team that is working on the typeface, start by creating things that are a little bit out of the box, a little bit more expressive and interesting to look at. And then we start discussing and narrowing things down, but also refining things to kind of achieve the end goal, which is an accessible and ownable typeface. And of course, I think one very, very important part of this project was all the user testing that happened and how the users informed some of the decisions that we took. It's a collaboration of internal design choices, collaboration with you as a client, and feedback on the elements that should be carried through, and the users. And I thought that was a really beautiful way to ensure that the choices were collective and ensuring that what is created will have longevity and will work for all the elements of the brand.
It was hugely important to involve our whole community with the process. We wanted to make sure that the font was truly accessible. So we were looking at working with teachers, with parents, with children, with people with dyslexia, elderly groups, with people with dementia, and making sure that we tried it with the widest range possible.
I want to take part in this project because just like symbols needing to be consistent, the fonts need to be consistent that we use with our children too. And I felt like if I could share my voice with Widgit on this project, then learners like mine, high support needs learners, non-speaking learners like mine would be able to access these fantastic resources just as much as anybody else.
A lot of the accessibility requirements when it comes to reading usually are kind of blurred as well with the fact that there is context in what you're reading. And in your case, there is an image and then there is a word underneath that. And it's aimed for people that might not know how to spell or say this word. So ensuring that one would really understand that an L is an L and not confusing with another letter was very, very important. So we have a few of those little details in there, like the L is the one with a tail, to ensure that it's not confused with an I. Then the one has a clear serif at the bottom to again not be confused with a lowercase l. There was a lot of discussion with the Y, which I thought was very, very interesting because there are different ways to write a Y. There is a V-shaped Y or a U-shaped Y, and I know we tried a lot of different ones, and your user testing was very interesting to also see the preferences and the results that kind of gave the answer of which Y we should go for. We also went for a single story A, which tends to, for long form reading text, to be more preferred. But because you have a lot of children as your audience and children haven't learned the double story A at school, they mainly focus on the single story A, we have prioritized this one in the font. So it's all those little details that were very, very important and very interesting to kind of bake into the font.
I noticed when I was looking at the widget font options, they gave me 5 options. And I noticed how even just the tiniest little change, the tiniest flick of a G or a hat on an A made such a difference. And I think that would surprise some people that aren't in the classroom. But those tiny changes really do make that much difference to my learners being able to access the resource. So by having people on board, so teachers and educators and people that understand the learners that Widgit reach so well, really helps to build that accessible font.
I think overall the Widgit typeface is a beautiful, warm, humanist design. It has some very interesting details that are very much inspired by the illustrations. So what we wanted to ensure is that when you use the font side by side with the illustrations, that it has and carries the same warmth. So if you look at the terminals of the C, the E, the S, they are slightly inclined, but on the straight side, because we wanted to ensure that they are not too curved to kind of create a nice block effect when you see the word, but they also have a slight incline and a softness to it to ensure that it blends nicely with the smoothness of the outlines of the icons and the symbols that are used throughout the Widgit brand. Some other little details that are quite nice is the way the A, P, B, Q, G letters combined. So there's one part that is rounded and the other one that is sharp. And again, that was to kind of bring a balance because we didn't want to over round it as well. Over rounding it made it look a little bit too naive, and we wanted this kind of balance between the two.
I think I'm just really proud that we have something that we believe is truly accessible, that's going to work for our users for years to come. It should work for our international groups as well. And it's something that we can use within our whole product line and our wider product line when we license symbols and the schools we work with. We really want this font to be used by as wide a people as possible in an accessible context.